Good evening, everyone. Corey Empowers with Mental Wealth Wednesday. We are in November where we have celebrated Veterans Day and still celebrating with our special guest today who served in the Army, and he's going to tell you all about his story. There was such a wonderful opportunity for me to read the names of colored troops from the Ohio Regiment in Washington, D.C., where all the colored troops' names were read aloud during Veterans Day. So it was quite an honor to read the names of those from Ohio, being that I am from Ohio as well. But special shout out to all the veterans and the loving memory to those who have passed on. We want to continue to cherish the work and the service that our veterans have done and continue to do each and every day. I would also like to send love and light to those family members and friends of our National Guard members who were shot today in Washington, D.C. Just wanted to acknowledge that. And we do care and send love and light to all those who have served, who have been injured, and who have lost their lives serving this country. And today we have with us Mr. Daryl Herman, who also honorably served our country. We also want to acknowledge a very special holiday tomorrow, special for a lot of people. A lot of people take the time to love up on their family members and just have the time to love and cherish them. At the same time, we want to acknowledge the pain that this holiday may cause to Indigenous people and those who are concerned about those who were harmed throughout our country's history. And we want to acknowledge and shed love and light to all of those who may be impacted negatively about the holiday and its history. And at the same time, cherish those families who choose to love each other on this day, as well as every day, but especially on Thanksgiving. And with that, I would like to welcome Mr. Daryl Herman, who is honoring us with his presence today. He's a tremendous advocate for severe mental illness, and he does tremendous work by sharing his story, sharing his time, and sharing his talents. So without further ado, Mr. Daryl Herman, how are you today?
Doing fine, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for joining me on this conversation. I just want to give you an opportunity to share a little bit about yourself, your story, and how you advocate for those who are living with severe mental illness and their families and loved ones who are providing them with care and support.
Well, I grew up on a small family farm in western Kansas, about 30 miles east of Dodge City. For those of you that are Western fans, that's the real Dodge City. I can literally suck at that kind of Dodge. I went to college at Kansas State University to study physics. In 1976, I graduated, got a commission through ROTC into the Army, and went on active duty, served in the Army as a field artillery officer. By 1984, I was a captain. My specialties were field artillery and nuclear weapons, and I became psychotic. Started believing that I'd been drugged with an experimental drug that was having strange effects on me, and that was why I just couldn't cope with anything, was falling apart, and just have all sorts of problems. Well, because I thought I had a medical problem by being drugged, I decided to go to the Army hospital, ask them for help with this. They quickly realized I was becoming delusional and psychotic, and we went on from there, and I wound up in a military psychiatric ward. I spent my 30th birthday in that military psychiatric ward. And it was a real bummer of a 30th birthday because I knew my military career was over. They just won't let you work with nuclear weapons when you got psychosis. So I knew that was over. The diagnosis eventually became schizophrenia. I went back to college after the Army released me from active duty. Got a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science, then proceeded to work as a professional computer programmer very successfully for about 18 years. Until the stress of both coping with my illness and working at the same time became too much. At that point, I went on disability. This was in 2004. At that point, I decided I would make it my mission in life to do everything I could to help people with severe mental illness live better lives. And that's what I'm doing to this day. After going on disability, I started doing hospital groups in Columbus, Ohio, where I live. Trying to help people live better with mental illness. During the 10 years before COVID, I spoke to more than 30,000 people in those hospital groups. And as part of that, I decided to write a book because I found there's a lot of things that people needed to know that they just didn't know, and a lot of questions they had that they didn't know the answers to. So I wrote a book, tried to give them the best information I could to get them started in the right direction. It's not everything you need to know. It's just the very basics, the bare bones stuff you need to point yourself in the right direction and get on with your life. And in December of 2023, I founded the National Shattering Silence Coalition and joined it. I've been very active with them ever since, and it's given me a whole new venue to talk about things and get advocacy out there. Mm-hmm. And in summer of 2024, I became the policy director for Ohio for the National Shattering Silence Coalition, and still active with them to this day.
That is beautiful. And I see that you're wearing the shirt. Please tell us a little bit about National Shattering Silence Coalition.
National Shattering Silence Coalition is a small but rapidly growing national organization that's dedicated to helping people with serious brain illnesses, severe mental illness, live better lives, advocates for better outcomes for patients, families, and mental health professionals. It's composed of people with severe mental illness, family members and friends of those who have severe mental illness, and also mental health professionals who work with severe mental illness. So we really get it. The people that are dealing with this are all volunteers. There's no paid staff anywhere. It's all volunteer. People are dedicated because they're personally impacted. They understand from having a lived experience what it's like to either have it or know someone who's got it and work with that.
Wow, that is powerful. And we know that lived experience is very, very important. And just from your experience, both having lived experience as well as working to advocate for others and working with organizations like the National Shattering Silence Coalition, what do you see as the biggest failing thing in the mental health system with respect to those who are suffering from psychosis and or psychotic illnesses?
I think the biggest problem we have with the mental health system is that it does not educate you on how to live with your mental illness. Most people think you take a pill and everything's fine, but that's just a start of it. There's a whole lot more you have to know. Taking a pill is like telling someone with type 1 diabetes, you've got type 1 diabetes, take insulin and send them on their way with nothing else. It just doesn't work. There's a whole lot of more stuff you got to know and got to do to live a good, successful life when you have a psychic illness. And nowhere in our mental health system is anyone charged with teaching you how to do that. In fact, a lot of the mental health professionals don't even know what skills you need to know. They think a lot of them think it's just take a pill and go on your way. And that's the biggest failure of the mental health system. We don't educate anyone on how to live with their illness. And of course, that impacts the families as well, because the families don't know anything about this either. A lot of them are being told by the mental health professionals, take the pill, everything's fine. And that's just a start. And so it trickles down to everyone. The mental health system needs to educate people on how to live with their illness.
Yeah, that is very, very important, because I know in my family it was, and we believed just take the medicine and everything will be better. But what I've learned, and even if my loved one took the medication, had all of the services that were available, it didn't stop all of the symptoms. And we have to understand, like, people have varying degrees of severity in terms of the symptoms that they may have with their particular diagnosis. And even if a person has the same diagnosis as someone else, it doesn't mean that they would exhibit the symptoms the same way. What do you say to family members and friends that are just trying to understand this and trying to find their place in their loved one's life in order to help them and be the most helpful that they can?
One of the first things I advise them to do is read my book and get the basic information I try to give out. Because if you don't understand what the illness is and what it does to a person, there's no way you can help them, because you don't understand what they're going through or what they're doing. Probably the most key thing is what psychosis is. A lot of people don't understand what psychosis is and what it does to a person. In order to be psychotic or in psychosis, most people have hallucinations and delusions. Hallucinations are sensory experiences you have and those around you don't. For example, hearing voices that aren't there is the most common one you're given. but it can be any of the five senses. It can be any experience you could imagine having for any one of those five senses. For hearing, you can hear things aren't there. You can hear voices, you can hear music, you can hear doors slamming, bells ringing, gunshots, it can be any sound at all. It's the same for the others of the five senses. It could be any experience you can imagine for that sense. Delusions are fixed false beliefs that the person may have, regardless of if it's the contrary. There could be grandiose. The person may think he's Jesus Christ or the Pope or the President of the United States. There could be paranoid nature. The person may think the CIA or the FBI is after him. Could believe that an alien has replaced a family member and the alien is out to kill you in disguise as the family member. It can be anything. The only limit on what form of delusion you can take is it has to be something the person can imagine. If they can't imagine it, if they can't have that delusion, but anything they can imagine can be a delusion. And the key thing to remember is that while you're experiencing psychosis, these hallucination delusions are your reality. They're just as real as you and me sitting here talking right now. It's real to the person. It's not something they can think about and talk about and negotiate with. It's real to them. It's their reality. And that's why it's so important to get help, because delusion hallucination can change very rapidly. For example, I mentioned that an alien may have replaced a family member as a possible illusion. If you think that's true and they're out to get you, and you have a hallucination that says the person is getting ready to kill you, in self-defense, you may decide to kill that person. And it's all in your mind, it's all real. You're acting in self-defense. But to everyone else, it's total nonsense. It doesn't exist.
Wow. That is very complicated. And I know it's probably difficult for people to understand that if they haven't been a witness to delusions and hallucinations or haven't experienced them themselves. And what we know, a very special word, a word that I've tripped up many, many times, and others may hear it for the first time, but anosognosia. How does that impact one's ability to manage their symptoms or complicate the ability to manage the symptoms?
Well, anosognosia is basically a lack of insight. They don't realize what's going on. And for someone who is psychotic, like I said, those hallucinations are real. They can't imagine them not being real. And that's part of anosognosia. But another big part of it that I don't think a lot of people realize is that once you're on medications and you're no longer experiencing new hallucination delusions, hopefully, some of us still do even when we're on medication, but hopefully they've stopped. You still remember what happened to you while you were psychotic. Because you experienced it with your own symptoms, it still seems real. You still think it actually happened. And the only way you can get insight is to recognize that you may have had experiences that weren't real, that never actually happened. And our system doesn't educate you, so they don't know what hallucinations are. Most people who become psychotic have very little knowledge of hallucination delusions, don't realize what they are, what they can do to you. So they don't realize that they may have to question what they think was real. And that's a big part of anosognosia, in my opinion. The fact that nobody knows they need to question the things they experienced while they were psychotic. There are things that happened to me 40 years ago, my first psychosis, that to this day, I don't know what was real, what was hallucination delusion, and I've had to accept I never will.
Wow. That's really powerful. How do you feel about that? Like, do you take time to try to figure out what was real and not, even for during your first episode?
Well, you have to do some of that to try to cope with the real world. You have to get some sense of what reality is. But in one sense, you're never going to know because it seems real. To you, it was real. And there's no way to tell the difference between that and something that was not hallucination delusions. The person who experiences it, it's real.
Yeah.
They have to come to question that they may not have experienced what they thought they experienced.
And what do you see as the biggest source of stigma against those with psychotic illnesses?
I think the mental health profession itself is the biggest source of stigma. There are doctors out there that don't believe a schizophrenic can function highly and live a normal life. I once had a psychiatrist change my diagnosis of schizophrenia and bipolar disorder because I relapsed while he was treating me, and he didn't think a schizophrenic could possibly work as a successful computer programmer, which I was doing. So he said, therefore, you aren't schizophrenic. I'm going to change your diagnosis of bipolar disorder because you can't be schizophrenic and be working as a computer programmer. Well, that's absolute nonsense, but to him, that was the way it worked. And there's a lot of other mental health professionals out there that don't understand what is possible with mental illness. Once you get your symptoms under control, you basically do whatever your skills and abilities allow you to do. But a lot of mental health professionals don't realize that. And then also, there's a lot of mental health professionals that don't understand what I just told you about psychosis either. There are professionals out there that don't understand what psychosis actually is and what it does to you. A lot of them. And there's a lot of mental health advocates that don't either. And that's a big problem. And as I said earlier, no one educates you. They don't understand what you need to know besides taking a pill. So I think the biggest problem is the mental health profession itself.
So what don't we know about the impact on a person with a psychotic disorder or illness? Besides the lack of insight, besides, the main symptoms of delusions and hallucinations, what would be helpful for them to know? Yes, and their abilities. How do we make them know that? And what else should they know?
There's a lot of things you know. Like I said, I covered the basics of my book. One thing I think everyone needs to know is what the signs of relapse are. There's common things you can look at and say, I'm getting ready to relapse. One of the easiest, most common recognizable symptoms is how you sleep at night. Anyone can have one sleepless night, but if you have 2 or 3 in a row, probably time to talk to your doctor and ask for help. If I'm becoming psychotic, I usually stop sleeping. If you're bipolar, becoming manic, you may sleep 2 or 3 hours a night or not at all. Time to talk to a psychiatrist. If you're depressed, you may be sleeping all day. Again, time to talk to a psychiatrist. Sleep is one of the best warning signs we have. And I've never heard mental health professionals educate people about that. In fact, in one of the hospital groups I used to run, I had a patient come up to me after I gave my speech on warning signs and talked about sleep. She said, I've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder for about 10 years. This time I was hospitalized. I hadn't slept in a month. And you're the first person in those 10 years to ever tell me that not sleeping might be a warning sign I should ask for help. She's been in the system 10 years, and no mental health professional has ever told her the best and most reliable warning sign of bipolar disorder is when you stop sleeping, you're becoming manic.
Wow. That's very, very interesting and something to know. I mean, even just, yes, that is something that's very, very important to know. Thank you for sharing that. And you've mentioned your book a few times. It's a great resource. Tell us the name of the book and where can people find it?
It's called Straight Talk About Living with Severe Mental Illness. It can be found on Amazon, or you can order it through Barnes & Noble as well. It's just the basics, but I get good reviews. If you look at the reviews I've gotten on Amazon, they're pretty good.
Oh, good, good. Okay, so everybody make sure you check out Daryl's book. Very, very helpful resource to just have some baseline information. If you want to be an advocate, if you want to help your loved one, and just to know information that is very, very important, because there are people in our community who may need help and don't know how to ask for help and may not have family or friends to help them. So thank you for sharing that title, Daryl. I really appreciate that. And as we talk about people who may not be able to manage their symptoms, the symptoms can be very scary to witness, very alarming to witness. What are your thoughts, though, on the standard that we presently have in terms of being a danger to yourself or to others? Whether is that acceptable? Are there other things that we should consider in order to have the option for involuntarily committing someone to an institution for mental health services?
Well, as I think you know, right now the standard is basically danger to self or others, and it's imminent danger. That means the psychiatrist has to believe you're about to go out and kill someone or commit suicide or something like that. To me, that's totally erroneous. Like I said a few minutes ago, when you're psychotic, your hallucination delusions can change at a moment's notice. You may not be dangerous 1 minute, but you may be dangerous the next. And if you're using this current state of danger to self or others, the psychiatrist is being asked to predict the future. He's being asking whether or not you're going to be dangerous 5 minutes from now or 10 minutes from now. He doesn't know. He can't say. And I wrote a paper on what I think the standard ought to be, published it on LinkedIn. And I think the standard should be actively psychotic, meaning you're having hallucinations and delusions, and you cannot distinguish that from reality. When that is the case, I think you should be hospitalized until that's no longer the case. And that's what I think the standard should be, is actively psychotic, meaning you're having hallucinations, delusions, and cannot distinguish them from reality. When that's the case, I think you should be hospitalized until that's no longer the case.
That's interesting perspective. I recall during my time, I completed the family to family course for NAMI back when it was 12 weeks. It's 8 weeks now, but a very extensive program. I learned a lot. And I believe that a lot of us family members had common stories in terms of how our loved ones presented in terms of their symptoms. And it's interesting that you say, they could be in psychosis one moment, but not, the next moment. And
it's not they're not in psychosis. They may not be dangerous one moment, but they may be dangerous the next.
okay, but if they're in active,
If they're actively psychotic, the hallucinations could be changing all the time. They may not be dangerous now, but 5 minutes from now, they may be dangerous.
Okay, but if they're actively psychotic, could that change in a moment's time where they may not necessarily be dangerous like 5 minutes later?
Usually not. When you're psychotic, you're usually psychotic until you get put on medications to bring you out of psychosis. The only treatment we have today to bring someone out of psychosis safely and rapidly is antipsychotic medications. In the past, they used to use instant shock therapy to electric shock therapy back in the 50s. They brought you out of psychosis temporarily. But there's a lot of danger with that. Instant shock therapy, about 1% of the people that were treated with instant shock therapy died as a result of the therapy. ECT is a temporary thing and not easy to do. The antipsychotic medications are much better, and that's why they're used today instead of instant shock therapy and electric shock therapy.
Okay. So I just want to make sure I'm clear. So a person who is actively psychotic, that's not equivalent to being dangerous, right?
No, actively psychotic means you're having hallucinations, delusions, and you cannot differentiate them from reality. You can't tell between hallucinations, delusions, and reality. To me, that's actively psychotic.
Okay. And so how do you define and see anti-psychiatry movement as opposing improvements to the mental health system for those who are experiencing psychotic illnesses?
Well, first, I think I need to define what I mean by the anti-psychiatry movement. Right now, the psychiatry profession, for about 50 years plus now, has said that things like schizophrenia are physical, biological illnesses. This is referred to as the medical model. And what they're saying is it's a physical, medical, biological illness. The standard treatment is called the biopsychosocial model. The biology of the illness is treated with antipsychotic medications. The psychology of the illness is treated with psychotherapy to help you cope with symptoms that don't go away even when you're properly medicated, and to cope with the functioning deficits and stuff that go along with the illness and the social problems you have with it. That's the psychology of it. The social part is changing the environment the person's in to make it more conducive to recovery. Usually that means lowering the stress levels in the work and or social environment or both, whatever. But the biopsychosocial model is how we normally treat the illness. And again, the medical model says it is a biological, physical illness. Anyone that does not accept it's a biological, physical illness is by definition anti-psychiatry. And there are a lot of folks out there that do not accept that it's a biological illness. And there are a whole lot of people out there in that category. And there's some major movements out there that say that. But anyone that says they don't accept the medical model is by definition anti-psychiatry. Another thing you're going to hear them say is they don't accept biological psychiatry. That's the same thing. They're saying they don't accept the medical model. Anyone that doesn't accept biological psychiatry or the medical model is by definition anti-psychiatry, because that's been the psychiatry position for about 50 years now.
Wow. Yeah, it has been a long time, and it seems like we're operating on antiquated information, antiquated laws and regulations, as we know also about the provision in the Medicaid law that prevents long-term institutionalization. And I can't for the life of me think of it right now. The
IMD exclusion. It's
IMD exclusion. Yes.
more than 16
What are your
people in a
thoughts on
facility.
that?
I think that's ridiculous. It's the only illness that has something that's exclusion. Any other illness, you could have as many patients as you need to at a facility. But if it's institution, the IMD exclusion says that anything to deal with mental illness, you can't have more than 16 in a facility, or you do not get paid for it by the government for it. That's
Right.
just outright discrimination. It's wrong. It should be changed immediately. But it's been around ever since they set up the program back in the 60s.
In the 60s. That's why it needs to be reevaluated. And, there was a group at the federal level called ISMIC, Interdepartmental Serious Mental Illness Coordinating Committee. A lot of great people have worked on that committee throughout its inception. And unfortunately, as of April of this year, it's terminated. But one of the issues that was addressed was the IMD exclusion. And there's a brief snippet in the report to Congress about it. But it would be very, very helpful if groups like that, and maybe even other advocacy groups, can continue to advocate to have that law looked at and revised in some capacity. What are your thoughts on that? And is your organization working on things of that nature?
Yes, that's one other thing we're working on, is trying to change the IMD exclusion. There are people in our organization that are working actively on that. Yes. You mentioned ISEMIC. ISEMIC was run by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, which has since been disbanded. And I have to say that I am not very happy with the way SAMHSA was run. It was heavily infiltrated by the anti-psychiatry movements I just talked about. They spent a lot of money funding anti-psychiatry movements, but did not fund legitimate research. If you look at what happened last summer, 2024, summer 2024, there was a thing called the SMI Advisor, Serious Mental Illness Advisor. This was a program to help people with the latest information on serious mental illness. SAMHSA cut the funding for that, but they are still funding to the time they stop existing anti-psychiatry movements that believe that mental illness doesn't even exist and don't understand what psychosis is. Dr. E. Fuller Troy wrote a great article about it called Hippie Healthcare in the Washington Monthly back in 2001, showing how SAMHSA has been doing this for decades now. They fund the anti-psychiatry movement and not the legitimate science. SAMHSA was spending huge amounts of money on the anti-psychiatry movement, not a lot on the legitimate science.
That's unfortunate to hear. I didn't know about that. I appreciate you sharing. I look forward to
I'll send you a link to article. I'll send you a link to Dr. Torres' article when we get done.
I would like to read that. Absolutely. He's done tremendous work. I remember I wanted to learn more about schizophrenia and severe mental illness. And one of his books was a guiding light for me. And then I connected with organizations like the Treatment Advocacy Center. And since that time, your organization and other advocates. And I think it's very important for us to continue to work together as much as we can to help amplify our voices and all for the benefit of those who are living with severe mental illness. And I think it's so unfortunate for people. And I know that there are some great groups that do great work, but at some point, we have to get beyond the dying with our rights on, as I've heard it said. People are allowed to live in the most horrific conditions because it's their right to. But if it was your loved one, if it was your grandmother, if it was your mom, would you want your mom, your loved one, to live in those conditions? And you've talked about the anti-psychiatry movement. I just want to take it a little bit more personal. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think the people who argue on the other side have loved ones who they've witnessed experience this, or are they in some way blaming the system if their loved one perhaps has died and didn't get the proper help and they feel that this is the way?
I think most of the people that are advocating loudest about this are actually the anti-psychiatry movement themselves. There's a major organization called the Hearing Voices Network USA, which is one of the major opposition points to this. But if you check out what they say about themselves, They talk about hearing voices. They call themselves voice hearers because they have hallucinations. Well,
Mhm.
hallucinations without losing touch with reality is not psychosis. And I've
Right.
read dozens of accounts of their experiences, and I have yet to see one that lost touch with reality. I've
Mm,
also yet to see one that experienced delusions. You could have hallucinations, lose touch with reality, and be psychotic. You could have hallucinations and delusions, touch reality, lose touch with reality, be psychotic. You could have delusions, lose touch with reality, be psychotic. The key thing is you have to lose touch with reality. I've never seen a story from a Hearing Voices Network person where they obviously lost touch with reality. So I don't think they actually experience psychosis. And I think
mm,
that's why they're so against this, because they don't realize what it's like to be psychotic. When you're psychotic, you have no idea what you're going to do next. Your hallucinations, delusions are controlling you. And it's like I said earlier, I don't think that standard of danger yourself or others is sufficient. I think it should be actively psychotic. If you are in fact psychotic, actively psychotic, you should be hospitalized until you're not.
that's a great distinction, and I really appreciate you sharing that because I just could not fully understand or appreciate arguments against um, trying to get someone help. I know that there have been horrible experiences that people have had in our country in terms of being institutionalized, and a lot of people fall back on the movie. You know, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest as the Bible, the example of how people would be treated. But I think that we have come a long way in terms of modernization of hospital facilities and education on treatment and services that a person should have and could have if they were committed to a hospital, not for life, but for the time needed to stabilize. What are your thoughts if we were able to lift the IMD exclusion or limit it in some capacity? What do you think will be the most helpful for people who will be able to receive treatment?
Well, the IMD exclusion really affects those who do very poorly with their illness. The majority of people with the illness are not affected by the IMD exclusion because they're not looking for long-term care somewhere, which is what we're really talking about with the IMD exclusion. But
Mhm.
you mentioned hospitalized, and I don't think our hospitals do a very good job. I wrote a paper called The Illusion of Recovery-Oriented Hospitals about this. What I point out in that paper is that if you get hospitalized today for psychosis, they'll take you in, hospitalize you, put you on medication, and in about 4 or 5 days, a week at the max, you're out of psychosis and they discharge you. During the meantime, they've done nothing meaningful to help you. All they've done is put you on medications. They have not told you what symptoms you're treating. They've probably not even told you your diagnosis, although some do. They probably haven't told you what side effects you can expect from the medication, although some give you a piece of paper and most patients just throw it away. They haven't told you what the relapse symptoms are. They haven't told you what causes relapses. They haven't told you how to deal with symptoms that don't go away. They haven't told you anything of importance. They just put you on medication and set you on your way as soon as you're no longer psychotic. To me, that's not recovery oriented. But every hospital in the country today calls themselves recovery oriented because they meet SAMHSA's recovery guidelines. And if you look at
Mm,
SAMHSA's recovery guidelines, there are only two things in there that institutions have to do. They have to have trauma, tra- trauma, trauma informed care, and they have to be culturally competent. Neither one
mm,
of those things addresses psychosis. I've never
mm,
seen a hospital talk about psychosis being trauma, but I can tell you from my experience, being psychotic is pretty traumatic. And I think
yeah.
for most people it is. But I've never seen any hospital anywhere that talked about trauma of being psychotic. And culturally informed care, uh, culturally competent care, that's not got anything to do with psychosis. That's for everyone. And
Mm,
so what they're doing, they're just put you on medication through your lower psychiatrist, shipping you out the door and putting you back on the street. And that just doesn't help anyone. We're not doing anything to treat people, but they call themselves recovery oriented because they're meeting SAMHSA's guidelines. Is those guidelines, SAMHSA does not understand psychosis either. They keep
mm,
talking about self-direction, self-determination, and I'm all for that. But when you're psychotic, You don't know what reality is. You can't choose your own direction. You can't choose what you want to do because you don't know what reality is. That's like saying someone with dementia should be allowed to walk out of the house into a snowstorm in pajamas and house slippers and nothing else. It makes no sense. And there's something else that they do too there. In those guidelines that say that you make informed decisions about their health care. How can you make informed decisions when you don't know what you've got? You don't know what your symptoms are. You don't know what. Nobody tells you this stuff. So how can you make an informed decision? So it's just garbage.
That's very interesting, and I do want to add on to there again. I mentioned earlier about just having basically a spectrum of severity in terms of the symptoms that someone may experience, and some people aren't able to work. Some people don't have the skills and they meet the legal definition of having a disability. And so for a person who is totally disabled due to their symptoms, if they're not taking the medication, for example, as they should, or the full prescription and all of the treatment that's recommended for them, they may not be able to work. They may not be able to function fully on their own. What suggestions, in addition to getting your book, what suggestions, tips do you have for family members, caregivers, just individuals who want to help someone who may live with severe mental illness?
Well, I always tell people that most of us with severe mental illness can live relatively normal lives, provided we do three things. Number one, take your medications as prescribed. Number two, stay away from alcohol, drugs, and marijuana. And number three, cooperate with the treatment team. You do those three things, you have an excellent chance of a relatively normal life. There are no guarantees. Some of us don't do well even when we do all those three things. There are no guarantees, but you have an excellent chance. And that means you won't be going to the hospital every time you turn around. You may be just being a good citizen, but you can live a relatively life provided you do those three things for most of us.
So for the caregiver that has a loved one that doesn't do any of those three things, do you have suggestions for that person or people? And if so, what are they?
Well, I think part of the problem here is that we don't educate folks again. Like I said earlier, you don't get education about how to live with your illness. You don't know what it is. You don't know what it does to you. And if you don't get the education, you're nowhere. You don't believe it if it's real. And I think we need to educate folks. I think that would help a lot of it. There are still going to be people that are failures of the system that don't get it. But I think we have a lot less failures of the mental health system if we actually educate people about their illness, how to live with it. I think we're always going to need AOT and things like that, but we'd have a lot less people meeting that category. We have a lot fewer relapses, a lot fewer hospitalizations if we educated people on how to live with their illness. And my book, I wrote it specifically for the person with the illness, but family members get a lot out of it too. They get a lot of information to help them understand what's going on too. I've had many good comments from family members as well as people with the illness.
Okay. And you mentioned AOT. I know a lot of people, organizations are advocating for that in their states. If their state doesn't already have a program, tell us, what is AOT and how do you feel it can benefit?
AOT is abbreviation for assisted outpatient treatment. What this is treatment that is mandatory under the supervision of a judge. It's out in the community. The person has to report to the judge every so often, report on progress. He has to comply with his treatment plan, do the things he's supposed to do to get treatment, cooperate with his case manager, stuff like that. But the whole point is it's organized. It's mandatory on his part to get him stable and used to the idea that he can live a normal life. And without this judge supervision, some people just never do get it. And it's a very key thing for people that are doing poorly, that are not getting the help from the system they need. I think it's very essential. Right now, there are only two states that don't have such a program. They are Massachusetts and Connecticut. Every other state has some kind of AOT program. It may go by different names, different categories, things like that. Another thing we have a problem with is the AOT programs across the country are not standardized. There are some AOT programs that are excellent, and others that probably shouldn't exist because they're just terrible. But it's different. Here in Ohio, each county does its own thing. Some counties have outstanding programs, some don't. And we need to make it work for everyone, get the best practices, and get everybody on the same page, get good programs everywhere. But there are people who will always need that kind of intervention because they just don't get it. I said earlier that the hallucinations are real to you after the fact. Some people never, or only with great difficulty, realize that they can't trust their memories of what actually happened. And if you can't trust your memory of what actually happened, you've got to look at that. But there are some people that never accept that, never get to that point. They're the ones that end up at AOT and stuff like that, where they just can't adjust the fact that they may have experienced things that weren't real. So then it was all real.
Yeah, that's very important to understand and know. And it seems like I would say my takeaways thus far in this interview, education is a very important step in this process, whether you are the person living with symptoms or a caregiver. Education about the illness, the disease, the services that are available, the options for treatment, and also increased advocacy with groups that align with your beliefs and mission and what you're trying to do with helping a loved one or yourself. And definitely included in that is getting a copy of your book. And then
there's an old saying that knowledge is power, and I firmly believe that.
Yes. And the third thing, standardization, and that's very important on so many levels. Like as an attorney, we have the American Bar Association that provides, our rules of conduct, professional conduct. With schools, there's the accreditation process, to have certain standards across the board. And I think that's important because people move, right? If one simple thing, people move, and the standard of care should be the same and similar throughout our country in order to allow us to freely move about this country and expect and deserve the same type of treatment wherever we go, or the opportunity to have the treatment wherever we go. So I appreciate all that you have shared with us tonight. And those are just my 3 takeaways thus far. But throughout all of your advocacy and what you have learned, tell us about your, I don't want to say dream, what you look forward to accomplishing and working for the organization that you work for. And if you are involved in any other organizations, what do you intend to accomplish with all the work and time that you have put in?
My number one goal is education. You mentioned that comes out loud and clear. To me, that's the answer to a lot of our problems is education. We need to educate the patient on how to live with this illness. We need to educate the family on what's going on with the patient and how to help him live with this illness. We need to educate the mental health providers on what the illness is because a lot of them don't know. To me, education is the key to solving this whole big mess. And right now, there's a lot of people that just don't know what they don't know.
And I think now even just education is questionable in terms of what you choose to use as your source. As we talked about earlier, there's a whole movement with anti-psychiatry. And with the anti-psychiatry there, I guess there's some level of education that they are also researching. And so I think that's where the standardization comes in, right? Like what qualifies as credible information that you're relying upon to educate yourself.
That's a big problem. And that's why the anti-psychiatry movement is such a big mess for what we're doing, because they're putting out misinformation and passing it off as the real stuff. And because people don't know what the real stuff is, they think it sounds reasonable. I mean, everyone thinks that people should have the right to determine their own future, their own life, make their own choices. I perfectly agree with that. But when you're psychotic, you can't do that because you don't know what reality is. But the anti-psychiatry movement keeps pressing to let people decide for themselves when they don't put out the fact that if you're psychotic, you don't know what reality is, and you can't make a good decision for yourself. And that's
Right.
part of the education process. We have to educate what psychosis actually is before people understand why it's necessary to not allow people to do whatever it is they feel like they want to do.
Mm. Because it can ultimately be harmful to themselves and to others. Well, thank you so very much for all that you have shared with us this evening. I want to close out with any positive statement you want to share, words of encouragement or hope for people who are out here trying to help their loved ones, or a person who may struggle with their symptoms. What words of encouragement do you have for them today?
Thinking back to my personal life, every time I run into a brick wall, I just pick myself up, dust myself off, and start trying to move forward again. And I think that's what we have to keep doing. Just keep moving forward.
Mm,
If you fall down, just pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and keep moving forward. Don't ever give up. Just keep going.
that's beautiful. And for those who may not know that they have fallen or may not know who to trust because they're in psychosis and don't understand, I just encourage family members to keep going, keep trying to love your loved one, keep trying to help your loved one, and know that you may not ever receive the thanks or appreciation, but know that the work that you are doing, the service you're providing, the love that you are showing is invaluable and very much needed. So, in the words of Daryl, keep going. Daryl, thank you so much for joining me tonight. It was an absolute honor to have you on and sharing your story, sharing your journey. It's a powerful testament to the power of our individual strength and relying upon and receiving the help of others, and knowing about your illness and understanding the need to take the medication and continuing to work towards your healing journey and your recovery. Thank you for being so vulnerable and transparent and sharing your story and the effort to help others. I truly appreciate you and your work, your advocacy. It is invaluable and very much needed. So thank you for joining us today. And you know what? I also want to say we talked about it being Veterans Day during this month, as well as Thanksgiving tomorrow. But it is also National Family Caregivers Month. So if you are a caregiver, know that you are appreciated, not just in November, but all year long. Thank you for all that you're doing to take care of others. Again, this is Corey Empowers with Mental Wealth Wednesday. Check us out every fourth Wednesday with tremendous guests. Tonight's guest was Daryl Herman, and it is with the National Shattering Silence Coalition. We thank them for the work that they're doing as they continue to expand and grow throughout the country. Thank you, Daryl. Have a great evening.
Thank you. And it was an honor to be here.